You're listening to the Less Stress Lawyer podcast, episode 105. Today, we're talking all about perfectionist tendencies. You ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Less Stressed Lawyer, the only podcast that teaches you how to manage your mind so you can live a life with less stress and far more fulfillment. If you're a lawyer who's over the overwhelm and tired of trying to hustle your way to happiness, you're in the right place. Now, here's your host, lawyer turned life coach, Olivia Vizacaro.
Well, hello there. How are you? Things are good in my neck of the woods. Life is a little crazy over here, but in a good way. I just moved home to Michigan for the summer, and I've got a lot of travel coming up. I'm getting ready to head to New York to see some friends before I hop on over to Italy for about 2 weeks. So I'm looking forward to that. And then I have a bunch of exciting travel coming up over the summer. Some of it's for work, some of it's for pleasure. I hope you are starting to get ready to enjoy your summer. Charleston was a little too hot for me, y'all. It was like 95 the week that I was leaving and humid as all hell. And I didn't know this, but the mosquitoes down there are vicious. So I'm excited to be back in Michigan for the summer. There is nothing better than a Michigan summer, in my opinion. But I hope that you are enjoying the months as they start to get warmer, wherever it is you're tuning in from. I guess unless you're on the other side of the world, then it's getting ready to be winter for you, which I always find kind of crazy. Anyways, I digress. Today, I want to talk about a really enlightening topic. So many of my clients don't realize they're perfectionists. And I've mentioned this on the podcast before. Many people believe wrongly that perfectionism only looks like type A perfectionism, which is where you've got all of your T's, crossed, all of your I's dotted, all of your ducks in a row, all of the time. You're on top of everything. There's never a hair out of place. As one of my clients said, she used to be perfectionistic about hosting dinner parties. And there's a joke from one of my past live events that she couldn't tolerate a chickpea being out of place because she likes to make hummus when she hosts dinner parties. So if that's you, if you think that that's the only way perfectionism makes an appearance in your lives, this podcast episode is going to be so informative for you because I'm going to introduce you to all of the different types of perfectionism, all of the perfectionistic tendencies that I notice in my clients. So I've identified 20 of them, and we're going to walk through and I'm going to explain what this looks like in practice, what it looks like in your day-to-day life so you can start to spot it. The first step to overcoming any problem is creating awareness around that problem. So you have to be able to spot your perfectionism in order to combat it, okay? So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to teach you how to spot it in your own life so you can start to solve for it when you see it, so it stops holding you back. Because you might be like me. I used to think being perfectionistic was a good thing, but it really, really isn't. It ends up paralyzing us. So I'm going to teach you how to spot it so you can solve it. All right. So the first perfectionist tendency is striving for flawlessness. All right. So that's going to be like your quintessential perfectionism. You just expect yourself to be flawless, to never, ever make a mistake. All right. So check in with yourself. Are you doing that? Are you expecting perfect from yourself? What do you expect from yourself? What are your standards that you're holding yourself to? Okay. Do you get really frustrated with yourself when something doesn't go flawlessly? If that's the case, then you're being perfectionistic. I also want you to check in with yourself. What do you expect from yourself in your job or in your personal life, in the roles that you have? Do you have really unattainable descriptions for those jobs, for those roles that you hold? Do you expect yourself to win every case? Do you expect yourself to win every motion? Do you expect yourself to get the terms in the deals that you do, all of them without fail? Do you expect yourself to be a perfect parent? Maybe you wouldn't use perfect. You might use the term best, which just means perfect. If we're striving for best or better or more, those are perfectionistic terms. So I want you to check in with yourself. Are these standards that you're setting for yourself completely unrealistic? And if so, that's your perfectionism making an appearance. The second perfectionist tendency is a fear of being messy or imperfect. So if you're someone who experiences a lot of embarrassment, or that's your greatest fear is feeling embarrassed in front of other people or feeling judged by other people or people having a negative opinion of you, if that's you, it's coming from this place of being afraid of being messy or imperfect. I've had to do so much work on this in my own life. I used to really have a serious fear of being perceived as messy or imperfect, being perceived like I didn't have my shit together. I loved to, keep up that appearance of having everything figured out. I wanted people to always think that I had all of my ducks in a row. So if that's you, if embarrassment is like your worst nightmare, then you probably have a fear of being messy or imperfect. Okay, the third perfectionistic tendency is all or nothing thinking. Now, I'll record an entire episode on this concept because I think it warrants it. There's a lot to talk about here, but all or nothing thinking is very rigid, black and white thinking. So things are either all one thing or all another thing. There's no nuance, there's no spectrum, there's no gray area in between. So if someone gives you negative feedback on a project that you worked on, you think the entire thing is bad. You don't have the ability to differentiate between, oh, that just needs to be improved a little bit, and the rest of this is good. Or if someone says something to you that you don't like, you think they just don't like you, right? You take it to the farthest extreme. There's no nuance for someone can say something that you don't like to you or something that you think is a little rude or maybe offensive, and they can still like you. I work with a lot of people. If they don't get the bonuses that they want in their jobs, they'll go into all or nothing thinking and they'll make it mean that they're not valued at work. They make the bonus responsible for all of the value that the company places in them. And that's not true. People can value you and you cannot get the bonus that you want. There can be nuance there. There's an in-between area. So perfectionists really like to indulge in it being all one way or all another way. There's nothing in between, okay? Now, the fourth perfectionist tendency is taking too long to complete tasks. If you're like me, you know all too well what this looks like. Think of the email that is like 3 sentences that you take 30 minutes to write when you could have taken 5 minutes to write it. Or you're going down rabbit holes when it comes to legal research and you just keep searching and searching and searching and searching when you know you've probably already found a good enough answer. Maybe you don't do legal research, but you look for templates or precedent when it comes to drafting documents, and you just spend hours looking for the perfect template. And you end up investing a lot of time unnecessarily because you're searching for perfection, right? So you end up taking way too long to complete tasks. You reword things, you overwork them, you over-edit, and the task ends up taking way longer than it needs to be. That's definitely a perfectionistic tendency. Now, the fifth perfectionist tendency is on the opposite side of this. So you tell yourself that things shouldn't take as long as they do. So many of my clients struggle with this. They're constantly doing work and telling themselves that they should have been able to do it faster. Now, they make this decision or determination based on nothing. There is no guidebook that says it should take you X amount of time to complete this task. There's just going to be what's normal for you. And even though they're basing this on nothing, their brain just offers up to them, this shouldn't have taken me this long. I should have been able to do this faster. And they don't like how long it takes them, so then they make themselves wrong. This is perfectionism at its finest. So when you're doing this, I tell people that you want to ask yourself, when you're done with the task, write out what you did to complete that task. Write out all of the micro steps. And then from there, you can start to review it and edit. Are there any steps that you would eliminate? Or are there any steps that you would reduce the time that you spent on it? If the answer is no to both, then it shouldn't have taken you any less time to complete. It took you the amount of time it was supposed to take, and you can stop beating yourself up for taking as long as it took. All right. Number 6, as far as perfectionistic tendencies go, is needing things to be complete. So I see my clients struggle with this when they're planning out their day and they don't want to get started on something because they want to be able to finish it in one sitting. And then they end up kicking the can down the road, not getting started because they're telling themselves, I need to be able to start and finish it all at one time. They really can't stand the feeling of incompleteness. They love to tie a bow and finalize things. Now, I get that that feels good and your brain releases dopamine when you finish things, but if you set yourself up to work that way, you're going to be postponing those big ticket items. And that's really what moves the dial on you getting your work done. You've got to be willing to start those big ticket items, even if that means that you're not going to be able to complete it all in one sitting. Now, another thing that you can do here, if you struggle with this, is just to break the task into smaller micro tasks, because then you can finish those micro tasks. Maybe you are overwhelmed at the thought of cleaning your entire house and you keep kicking the can down the road. But if you break it up into, I'm just going to vacuum, or I'm just going to unload the dishwasher, or I'm just going to do a load of laundry, then you can get the dopamine of completing that micro task. And over time, you'll eventually complete everything that goes into cleaning your house. Same thing with working on a brief or drafting a document. If you break it into those smaller micro tasks, you'll be able to get those quick wins and feel like you're accomplishing something. All right, perfectionist tendency number 7, making unrealistic plans. I've talked about that a ton on the podcast. When it comes to time management, we love to try and shove 30 hours into an 8-hour workday. And I promise you, if you do this, you will not win. When it's you against time, time is a math problem, and then math never lies. So time is going to come out ahead and you're going to lose, right? But people make unrealistic plans because they don't like the reality of what they can actually accomplish in a given time period. So they want to make unrealistic plans so they can feel better about the plan instead of feeling underwhelmed by a realistic plan. So if you do this, you've got to come to terms with how much you can get done in a given time period. It is underwhelming. Accepting this is going to feel uncomfortable, but what is truly uncomfortable is making unrealistic plans and setting yourself up to fail. All right. So you want to be onto yourself if you do this. Perfectionist tendency number 8 is remaking plans over and over and over again. So people will do this to avoid getting started. They will think that they need a better plan. They like the space where they get to ideate and just keep brainstorming and thinking. So you'll make a plan, and then instead of getting started, you'll go back to the drawing board and remake the plan. You'll try and make it better. You'll add things to it. You really enjoy the planning phase, because if you're planning, you can't fail. Doing is where failure comes into play, and perfectionists hate failure. So you'll stay in the space where you're just making plans and remaking plans in order to avoid setting yourself up to fail or having to experience that negative emotion that comes with failing. You think you fail and then you feel inadequate or incapable, and that feels uncomfortable. So we'll keep remaking plans to avoid getting started. Perfectionist tendency number 9 is overcomplicating systems. I watch my clients do this, especially when it comes to planning their days or entering their time or managing their email inbox or creating their schedules, managing their to-do lists. They come up with really overcomplicated systems because you think complicated is better. It's not. The most simplistic systems are ideal because there's so much less friction to honoring that system and to working that system. So check in with yourself. Do you make things harder than they have to be? I just coached someone on this who was trying to come up with a system for delegating, and they were really overcomplicating it. You don't need to make delegation complicated. Create a list in your phone of things you'd like to delegate. You can add to it all the time, and then create a standing meeting with the person that you delegate to so you can assign tasks to them. That's the whole system. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. You don't need complicated spreadsheets. You don't need special tech. You can just use the Notes app on your phone. That works perfectly fine. All right. So if you're making overcomplicated systems, that's because you're indulging in perfectionism. You want to be onto yourself. Ask yourself, how can I make this simpler? All right. Perfectionist tendency number 10 is never getting started. You just keep avoiding starting. And again, this is because you're afraid to do a bad job. You're afraid to fail. You're afraid something isn't going to be good enough. So you just never start. You distract yourself with things. You keep pushing it off. You're always avoiding the starting line. And this comes from your perfectionism, okay? Perfectionist tendency number 11, waiting for a better time to start. So this looks like tomorrow thinking. I'll start tomorrow. I'll start later. I'll do that later. I'll start at the top of the hour. That used to be a big one for me. I'd look at the clock and it would be, 9:42. I'm like, I'll start at 10. 10's a better time to start. A clean start. We love clean starts. But then we end up pushing things back in perpetuity because then 10:01 would come around and I'd be like, nope, I got to wait until 10:30 or 11. I need that clean, fresh start. So if you do this, be onto yourself. There's never a better time to start than now. I know that sounds super cliche, but I promise you it's true. So this is sort of similar to never getting started or waiting until a better time to start, but perfectionist tendency number 12 is waiting until the last minute. And there's a specific reason we do this, all right? One is that fear of failure. You just want to keep kicking the can down the road. But also, I used to be guilty of this. We wait until the last minute because you're never being judged on your best work. You're only allowing yourself to be judged on rushed work, on last minute work. And it creates an escape hatch because perfectionists are afraid that their best isn't good enough. And if you wait till the last minute, you're not ever demonstrating your best. You're demonstrating your rushed work. So it's going to be like B- work just by the default aspect that you're waiting until the last minute and you didn't give yourself enough time. So if you get negative feedback on your last minute work, you're like, oh, of course it wasn't good enough. I rushed. I didn't give myself enough time. That's the reason it's not good enough, not because I gave this my all and my all wasn't good enough. So it creates an escape hatch from being judged on your work. All right. If you do this, you want to be onto yourself. It's really insidious how perfectionists will procrastinate in order to avoid being judged on their work product. Perfectionist tendency number 13 is quitting prematurely. So instead of not getting started, you start. But if things don't go as planned or they don't go seamlessly right off the get-go, you'll quit prematurely and jump to something else that feels good. Like I said earlier, perfectionists don't like feeling messy and imperfect. So if you're learning something new or you're working on something and you're confused or it doesn't go well, maybe you're working on developing business and you don't get the results that you want, you'll quit. Or if you're working on learning how to manage your time and it's not going very well, it's really clunky because you're learning a new process, you'll quit prematurely and just revert back to doing what you did before. Because perfectionists like flawlessness, they like perfection, right? So if you don't experience perfection, you make it a problem, you think something's gone wrong, and then you go back to the status quo. If you do this, you've got to be onto yourself. You have to resist the urge to quit and keep going. You want to strive for 1% improvements. That's the sweet spot. Perfectionist tendency number 14. You make changes to what you're doing without data or without letting sufficient time pass. So business development is a really great example here. If you're working on developing business and you're feeling frustrated because you're not getting the results that you want, if you haven't let enough time go by to let the action you're taking take root, or you're making changes, but you're not basing it on data because you haven't done enough to collect reliable data, this is perfectionism. You don't like that feeling of inadequacy or disappointment, and you want to jump to something new because that ideating phase is so much more exciting. You love to be in that brainstorming space where you're coming up with and trying something new. Because when you do something for the first time, you get to indulge in the perfectionist fantasy that it's going to go perfectly. Once you've started to implement and it hasn't gone perfectly, now you're dealing with reality. And perfectionists don't like to deal with reality, okay? Perfectionist tendency number 15 is beating yourself up. If you are really hard on yourself, if you're really mean to yourself, this is your perfectionism talking. Again, it's expecting that flawlessness of yourself. So how do you talk to yourself when you're going through your workday? Are you mean? Do you kind of bully yourself? Is your inner critic really loud? If it is, that's your perfectionism having a conversation with yourself, all right? You want to make sure you dial that down because negative self-talk leads to negative emotion. Negative emotion drives negative action or inaction and produces negative results. So we like to think that beating ourselves up is going to help us perform better. It's going to light a fire under our ass, but that doesn't actually work, okay? It just leads to more negativity, more negative feelings, more negative action, more negative results. Perfectionist tendency number 16 is expecting to be good from the get-go. If you're working on developing a skill or you're trying something new, you'll expect yourself to be great at it from the start, okay? Another thing that I see pop up here is expecting yourself to know more than you do. So many of my clients struggle with this. They expect themselves to be an expert at everything. They expect themselves to have more knowledge at this stage, whatever stage in your career you're at, air quotes around this stage. They expect themselves to know more than they do. And they make what they don't know a problem rather than celebrating themselves for having learned what they've already learned. So check in with yourself. Are you expecting yourself to be good from the get-go? Do you give yourself any grace to learn new things? If you don't, you're being a perfectionist. Perfectionist tendency number 17, reinventing the wheel to make things better. When you don't have to. You have something that's good enough already, but you tell yourself, this could be better. So I'm going to start from scratch and create something new. We like creating. It feels really productive, but we end up spending a lot of time unnecessarily reinventing the wheel. So if you do this, you want to be onto yourself. Can you just use what you already have and save yourself the headache and the time? Is it good enough? Remember, we're aiming for good enough work. We're not aiming for perfect. We're not aiming for the best. I just coached someone on this. She created a presentation in January of this year, and she presented it to an online audience, and it went really, really well. And then she got asked to speak at a conference, and she was talking to me. She's like, I don't know what I'm going to present on. I'm like, why don't you just use the presentation that you did in January? It sounds like that was really good, and you've already got it all dialed in. It's all created. You don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. That sounds like a perfect thing to do. And she was like, no, that's not good enough. I need to make it better. I need to tweak it. I need to add more to it. I'm like, what if you don't have to do that? What if what you've already done is good enough and you can save yourself the headache and just use what you already have? Check in with yourself. Are you doing that? Can you use what you already have? All right. One caveat here is where using what you already have doesn't actually save you time. So I used to do this with looking for the perfect template, and I'd pour hours and hours into searching for the perfect template. Or I used to do contract coaching for one of my coaches, and I would search all of my old answers. So we would get written coaching requests. They would submit them, her clients, and then we would get those requests and we would respond to them in writing. So we would get the requests, and a lot of the requests were on the same or similar topics. And I would think to myself, I remember answering a question really similar to this. That answer was so good. I like the way that I said things on that answer. I'm going to go search for it. And I would spend so much time going to search for those answers. And I'd finally find the answer that I was looking for, and I'd read through it, and I'd copy and paste it into the new response that I was going to put together, but it wouldn't be a good fit. Things would be different about the original answer versus the new answer that I was trying to craft. And then I'd have to spend all of this time tweaking the original answer to make it fit the new answer, the new coaching request. And that ended up being a really indulgent use of my time, when what I could have just done is start from scratch, and it would have taken me a lot less time. So you've got to know yourself and know the situation. Does reinventing the wheel waste a lot of time here? Or would it be better for me to just start from scratch because I can do that faster than searching for the perfect template? Both ways, perfectionism is present here and can be problematic, but you've got to be able to read the situation and figure out which approach works best for you. Perfectionist tendency number 18, holding yourself to vague or ambiguous standards. So perfectionists really don't like setting clear goals, okay? We love making unrealistic plans, but we don't love setting concrete goals. And it's because when you set concrete goals, when you call your shot, you set yourself up to experience failure. If you're very specific about what you're aiming for and you don't hit it, you're going to tell yourself you fail. Now, I don't believe in failure. I believe you're always winning or learning, and that you have to quit in order to fail, because failure requires an end point from which you measure. So you have to quit in order to fail. But perfectionists will refuse to set concrete, specific, measurable goals. They'll just strive for better or more or less in order to keep it from being concrete and specific because you can't really monitor your progress and therefore you can't fail if you don't really know what you're aiming for. Now, the problem with this is that you never feel accomplished either because you always tell yourself, I don't know what good enough is. I don't know what enough progress is, but it's not this. And you're constantly striving for more. You're constantly chasing the horizon. And that feels terrible. You often feel inadequate as a result. So are you striving for vague or ambiguous standards? Check in with yourself. Where are you striving for more? Where are you striving for better? People do this with their to-do lists too. They just want to get quote unquote more done in a given day. They just want to be more productive. They want to be more efficient, but they don't really know what they're aiming for. So if you're doing this, you want to break this habit, break the cycle, and start to get clearer and more specific about what it is you want to accomplish. Now, perfectionist tendency number 19 is where you get to the 90% mark of a project that you're working on, and then instead of completing it, you jump to something else. Now, as much as perfectionists don't like feeling incomplete, we also don't like feeling judged. And when you finish something and you have to send it off to someone else, that's when you open yourself up to other people's criticism, other people's opinions, other people's judgment. And you want to avoid that. So you'll avoid completing something in order to avoid being judged on that work. So if you draft an email and you're almost done with it and you jump to something else, this is perfectionism running the show. If you're working on a brief or drafting a contract and you get to the 90% mark, but you don't proofread it, you don't finalize it and send it off, this is your perfectionism. You're doing it to avoid exposure, avoid that judgment. You got to be onto yourself. And if you do this, you've got to override that desire to avoid feeling judged, gag and go, and complete it, cross the finish line and send it off. It's going to save you so much strife and stress if you get things out the door. And perfectionist tendency number 20. This is so common. If you struggle with 1 through 19, I guarantee you do number 20. So perfectionist tendencies 1 through 19 are all about you. What you do, how perfectionism shows up in your life, the expectations you have for yourself. Perfectionist tendency number 20 is all about other-oriented perfectionism, where you think there's one right way of doing things, and when people don't do it that way, you think that they're doing it wrong. Now, this might be with the way people say things, with what they say, with what they do, with what they don't do, but if you feel a lot of frustration, disappointment, and resentment in your life towards other people, you are indulging in other-oriented perfectionism and you're struggling with this perfectionistic tendency, thinking that there's one right way to do things and thinking that everyone else is doing it wrong if they're not doing it the quote-unquote right way. This will cause you so much emotional suffering in your life if you struggle with other-oriented perfectionism. If you're perfectionistic with yourself, I promise you, you are perfectionistic with other people. There's no doubt about it. So you want to start to become aware of how are you being perfectionistic with other people in your life? What do you expect of them? Do you expect flawlessness from them too? Do you expect them to do things the quote unquote right way? If you do, what I want you to start to open yourself up to is the distinct possibility that there is more than one way to do things and that there isn't one right way. There are just different ways and a lot of ways work. I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but my ex-boyfriend was helping me move a while back and he was loading a bellhop cart and I was getting really frustrated with how he was doing it because I was totally indulging in other-oriented perfectionism. And I was starting to critique him and he was really direct with me. He's like, hey, I'm a grown adult. I know how to load a cart. Let me just do this. And I was like, all right, you're right. I'm totally micromanaging you. I will stop. I'll knock it off. So I let him do it. And lo and behold, he did it better than me. He had a better idea. I just didn't see the vision. And it taught me, I was able to learn that there's more than one way to do something. And even if his way hadn't been as efficient or as effective as mine, that's just my opinion. And it still gets the job done. There are different ways to go about doing things. I don't need to be frustrated that it didn't go the exact way that I envisioned it going. So check in with yourself. Do you indulge in other-oriented perfectionism? And if you do, how can you open your mind to recognize that other people aren't behaving wrongly? They are doing what they think is best, and best is an opinion. It's not a fact. And you can just hold space for them to have their own opinions and for you to have your opinions and for all of those opinions to coexist. Okay? So these are the 20 perfectionist tendencies that I wanted to introduce you to. This is not an exhaustive list. There are others, I'm sure, but these were the ones that I was able to identify that I wanted to make sure you were aware of. You want to start to look for these perfectionistic tendencies in your own life so you can start to overcome perfectionism. Now, if you want help overcoming perfectionism, I teach a system, a process for overcoming perfectionism, how to define good enough, how to strive for B+ work so you can be less hard on yourself, so you can get more done, so you can stop freezing from the pressure that you create for yourself as a result of being perfectionistic. So you can dial down the negative emotion you experience when you're not attaining the impossible. If you want help with this, you want to make sure you get inside my signature coaching program for lawyers. It's called Lawyers Only. And inside that program, we get weekly coaching calls, group coaching calls, Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. They're an hour long, and we coach on so many different topics like overcoming perfectionism, stopping people pleasing, procrastination, how to stop doing that, how to manage your time, how to develop business, how to delegate, so many things that lawyers struggle with. It really is a one-stop shop for everything law school, your employers, and your parents didn't teach you. So you get those weekly coaching calls, but you also get access to the member portal. And inside the member portal, you've got a community platform where you can engage with the almost 100 other attorneys that are in the program. And this is just the beginning. We're just getting started. This group is going to grow and grow and grow, which is so exciting. But we've got almost 100 members right now. So you want to get in there. It's such an amazing networking opportunity. People get to crowdsource and share ideas with each other. There's nothing like being in a community of other like-minded people, people who face the same issues you face, struggle with the same problems that you struggle with, and want the same things that you want. They've got the same goals. They're working on the same things. They're going the same places you're going. So you want to make sure that you join a community where you can be open and honest about the things that you're struggling with, have that support system. It is imperative to really striving and succeeding in legal. Okay. And then aside from the community platform, you've also got a coaching request space. So in between our weekly calls, you can get coached as often as you want on any topic that you want, all things professional and personal. And then there's a masterclass vault with over 50 masterclasses that I've done on every topic under the sun. How to focus, how to relax, how to get stuff done, how to get organized, how to set and achieve goals, how to develop business, how to get better at managing money, how to manage your time, how to manage a team. The list goes on and on, all right? And then you've also got a space where you can ask me for feedback on things. If you're working on, let's say, social media marketing and you want my feedback on some content that you've created, you can post in the member portal and I'll give you feedback. There's some foundational course content that teaches you basically mind management 101, thought work 101. So it's really a deep dive into the introduction to coaching. I teach you the fundamentals so you have a strong foundation of how to use the tools that I teach. And then you can watch that on demand. You've got that. And then over the course of the summer and fall, I'm going to be releasing 2 new courses, time management for lawyers and business development for lawyers. So you want to make sure that you're in this program so you get access to those courses. And then last but not least, you also have the ability to purchase one-on-one coaching calls with me, one-off calls for an extra little bit of support. That's something I've never offered before. If you've worked with me one-on-one in the past, you've always had to work with me for a long period of time, 6 months or 5 months at a time. And this way, you're able to just get that pinpointed support when you're struggling with something. If you just need a little extra help, a little guidance or insight because you're struggling with a problem, you can jump in there, schedule a one-on-one call with me, and we'll meet and we'll go through whatever it is you're struggling with. All right. So you want to make sure you get inside Lawyers Only. The way to do that is head to my website, thelessstresslawyer.com/lawyers-only. All right. I'll link it in the show notes. And there's 2 ways to become a member. You can join as a monthly member for $150 a month. I promise you, there is no better value in the coaching industry for lawyers than this program. That is incredibly accessible. I designed it that way. I wanted to make sure it was incredibly accessible to people. I promise you, you can get creative and figure out how to make that monthly payment to get yourself the support that is going to make all the difference to you succeeding in the legal industry. Okay. And then if you want to save a little bit of money, You can pay all at once and you can join as an annual member, and that's $1,500 a year. So you save a couple $100 when you join as an annual member. And when you join, you lock in these prices. So if I increase the price in the future, you'll lock in these prices now. So you want to make sure you join while it's still $150 a month or $1,500 for the year. So you lock in that price for life. All right. So go to my website, thelessstresslawyer.com/lawyers-only, and go join. Join us inside the program. It will make all the difference in the world. If you struggle with perfectionism, that's the place you want to be to overcome it. All right. That's what I've got for you this week, my friends. I hope you have a beautiful week, and I will talk to you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Less Stressed Lawyer podcast. If you want more info about Olivia Vizzacaro or the show's notes and resources from today's episode, visit thelessstressedlawyer.com.